We would love to have a week without major news of anti-Semitism, and sadly this week was not that week. At the same time, we also each week have the privilege of working together with allies outside our community as well as within, who stand with us not only against anti-Semitism, but for the very values upon which our society is based. And so I'm pleased to welcome forward an ally and friend from our local Hindu community, Dr. Ragini Sharma, who I've been lucky enough to know through the Alliance of Canadians Combating Anti-Semitism, of which she's a proud and active member, and through the Alliance of Canadians Working with Laura Schwartz. That's a little-known organization. It's not an organization at all, but our member, Laura Schwartz, whose involvement in ALCA is one of the main reasons that Ragini and I have had the opportunity to meet, and that we have the privilege of having this program together today. And so to Laura, for your involvement in this program and everything you do for our larger community, Yashar Koach. Part of being allies is really just the opportunity to learn about one another, to get to know one another, and to understand our connections and what it is that brings us together. So Ragini, let me give you this microphone so that we can hear you. The Jewish community, while we still have new immigrants to Canada, is in a large percentage a relatively established community. And I admit, I don't know nearly as much as I wish I did about the Hindu community. So can you tell us a little bit, please, in general about your community and how its journey of finding its place here in Canada?
Well, first of all, thank you, Rabbi Dolgin, and Mark Sandler, and my dear friend Laura, for having me here. Please forgive me for reading a little bit, because this is so special to be here. I'm so honored and humbled to be sitting in here, and the service was so beautiful. I'm deeply touched. I think I've forgotten everything that I had to say. Honestly, I had to ask my husband to go get my notes, because my mind is a little blank after the beautiful service. You know, in our Hindu dharma, we say namaste. I just wanted to say shalom and namaste. The divine in me recognizes and bows to the divine in you. You know, these little sessions that we have are great opportunities for us to open our hearts to celebrating diversity, which I heard in the Torah was there. And building bridges, there's a great need today, I think you'd agree, for people to build bridges. You know, as we talk today about the immense challenges we as Jewish and Hindu people face, Jews in Israel and Hindus in Bharat, we are the indigenous people of our lands. And this is the struggle for Israel, I know. I wanted to mention something that I read also reflected in the service, is in our scriptures, there's less talk about fighting for freedoms and more about the debts and obligations that we have. And in our tradition, we have 5 debts. The first debt is to the God Almighty. The second debt is to our ancestors. And I heard that reflected in your service as well. And the third debt is to the knowledge keepers. You know, we're grateful to the rabbis, to the cantors, and all the traditional people who have kept this knowledge alive. And the fourth debt that I heard you mention, was to society. You know, without the infrastructure, without the roads, all the services, I think we owe a great debt of, and the last debt we owe is to Mother Nature. We walk on earth knowing that she's always there giving us everything that we need. So I just mentioned that so that you get a little bit of understanding of our Hindu culture. And I felt so much at home during the service praising, all the praise that we gave to each other and to God, and for the love of the gathering and the community. So to the question about, since ancient times, the Jews have lived in the diaspora because you were forced out. For the Hindus, our struggle has been in our own homeland. There's 1 billion Hindus worldwide, but as you know, there is not a single country that says that we are a Hindu country. We are still at 1 billion don't have a country that's a Hindu. Isn't that absolutely unbelievable? So kudos to the Jewish people, and we learn from you, and you're our inspiration. We've lived 1,000 years facing persecution in our own homeland. And that is why millions of people have, moved out of India, definitely some for opportunity, but some across the world, from countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, to flee persecution, murder, death, as you all know what happens. And many countries where they were kicked out. For example, from Uganda, they were brought there as indentured labor by the British during colonial times in many parts of the world. So then they had to leave when they were not welcome. So in terms of Canada, the immigration to Canada started around 1903 and 1904. At that time, as you may know, Canada was a whites-only country, and they didn't want brown people coming. So they made it very difficult. One of the rules they put was a continuous journey rule, that if you wanted to come to Canada, you'd have to be on a ship without a stop. So you can imagine coming from India was almost impossible without stopping. There was one chartered ship called the Komagata Maru, and it was chartered from Hong Kong to Vancouver, and it had 376 passengers, mostly Sikh and some Hindus, and they were not allowed to disembark. They stayed moored at the port for 2 months, and they had to return. So that is, one of the black marks in Canadian history of how people who were free to come were not allowed to come. And I know the government has apologized for that at one point. I want to mention that during this time, almost 4 million Indians, including majority Hindus, fought in the 2 world wars. And this is where India was a British colony, and even then this kind of treatment was given to Indians. I just wanted to mention a little digression that during the World War in 1918, Hindu-led brigade saved the city of Haifa. How many people have heard about that? Yes, nobody has heard about it. Isn't that amazing? So the town of Haifa in now Israel was freed from the Ottomans in 2018 by Indian soldiers, most of them who were Hindus. So please do look that up. So the main immigration to Canada started in 1967. And after that, as you may know, there was the Multicultural Act. When Senior Trudeau was there, was the country was opened up. And, many people came after that. And I want to just bring it to the current situation where in 2021, census, there were 828,000, so less than 1 million. And, immigration has grown considerably. India is, I just want to mention that when we say Hindu, it often means India, because 80% of the 1 billion Hindus live in India. although many are in the diaspora. So current population of, I guess we're having the census now, is going to be around 2 million, which is around 3% of Canada's population. I also want to mention, I earlier mentioned that people from different parts, so Hindus come from all over the world, including from England and Australia, where they have been living, and they come here from persecuted lands and other places. So it's still a very small community, but we are only 0.3% in prisons. So we're paying our taxes and doing our work, and it's absolutely incredible that we face so much prejudice. And if you go on social media, I think we're going to talk about that later. I also wanted to mention that over the past 10 years, 34% of all international students are Indian, and majority of them, of course, are Hindus. And there's only 95,000 left because, as you're aware, there's been a huge misuse of that student, immigration, and there's been a lot of fraud on behalf of Canadian universities who have brought these students here on false grounds. So it's a very complicated issue, but there's a huge backlash against these students, and there's only 95,000, so it's really come down. And also there's about 1.5 million techies. You often probably know that a lot of Indians come here with technical knowledge. So there's a lot of Indians here. Many Hindus are here on work permit, so just temporary. I hope that helps you understand our group.
Yeah, right. That's very, it's helpful just to be reminded, speaking personally, of how little I know. That's the beginning of learning, is being aware that there's so much more than I actually know.
No,
and it's
know
also
more.
amazing how many of those things have echoes in the Jewish community's experience.
Yes.
It's very meaningful to hear that. So I'm curious, likewise, like you said, the numbers of Hindus worldwide are dramatically larger than the Jewish community. But here in Canada, we're both minorities, and yet even as a smaller minority here in Canada, we Jews still manage to disagree amongst ourselves. It's okay, I have my own. We still manage to disagree amongst ourselves. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the elements within the Hindu community, just because obviously it's not a unified community any more than any other group would be.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the key, it's historically been a key strength also, and a weakness. It's a strength because over the 1,000 years, the colonials could not destroy Hindu dharma because there was no one pope or one leader that they could kill. It was so diverse. It was like the Hebrew, like the Jewish religion, it was oral-based, and so they couldn't burn our books and destroy our religion or kill our people and destroy, because every home had a temple, and it was very decentralized. But the advantage is that you don't have a unity, you don't have one voice. So in Canada also we have this problem. There's 28 different languages in India. Can you imagine? They're all different. I can't speak, just like I can't speak Hebrew, I don't speak Gujarati, I don't speak Punjabi, and so we can't communicate with each other. So this is a big difficulty. And there are regional differences. India is a vast, vast, ancient land. It's one of the oldest civilizations, just like the Jewish civilization. So it's very, every town, every province, it's completely different culture and food and everything. So we're very divided in that way. So it has its strengths and weaknesses, but then again, like I said, we don't have a voice. We do have core principles, so there is integral unity within the Dharma. Although I I want to mention that Hindus believe in one God also. But we are, we have free to choose the way we worship that one God, whether it's formless or in form. So that creates a huge diversity of how we worship. So then that creates further divisions, if you want. But there is a common belief in karma and reincarnation. So just a little thing about Hindu Dharma. So, like you in coming to Canada, like you have these obnoxious independent Jewish voices, you all heard of them, and the nonsense that they go around telling, and the problems that they've created for the Jewish community right here in Canada, not agreeing that, that Zionism is anti-Semitism, things like the challenges Mark has been writing about. We have people like that too. There's organizations that call themselves Hindus for human rights, and they're absolutely anti-Hindu. So, they put on the face that they're Hindu, and traditionally, since the colonial times, the British used, we allowed us to be used to put the guns on Hindu shoulders. We are the ones who shot our own people. There were only 1,000, some thousands of British who rolled over, and similarly from the Arab invaders who came. So, this is a big weakness that we do have. Our own people are our worst enemies, and they take up important spaces in academia, in media, and a lot of what we call atrocity literature is being written. Everything negative about India is what these people promote. Just like they promote about Israel, the minorities are being suppressed, same stories. We have so much, sometimes when I read about the problems Israel is facing, I just say, okay, scratch Israel out and put India or Hindus, and then you get the same story. So we have the backstabbers or whatever, they think they're, speaking on behalf of whatever, leftist, wokist, in cahoots with the people who hate our communities. They join them together, it's a nexus, and they form that, and we have that whole problem ourselves. I want to give you one example. At the Toronto District School Board, 2 so-called Hindu trustees moved a motion to declare that every Hindu is inherently bigoted based on caste oppression. So we had only 1 month to fight this, but they kept asking us, but isn't it the Hindus that have raised this? What is the problem? I'm like, no, these are not real Hindus. So, we had to fight it, and we won the cause, mainly because they had the Toronto District School Board had never received a single complaint about any oppression, any incident. On the other hand, there's numerous incidents of Hinduphobia or anti-Hindu hate, which, they've not recognized. So this is the difficulty we face. Let me just go to the next page, just in case I don't miss anything. So go ahead to question number 3. Am I taking too long? Please let me know.
Not at all.
Okay.
I'm so glad you're here, and it's just it's painful and at the same time meaningful to hear. It's all right. I have a microphone. It's challenging to hear at once that you share some of the challenges that we have even within your community.
Yes.
Here in Canada. I just want to ask a little bit about the challenges from outside the community, about the kind of prejudice. You mentioned a little bit about it in the other words that you shared, but if you could share a little. I still remember right after 9/11, when some powerfully ignorant individuals tried to deface a mosque and weren't knowledgeable enough about the people they hated, so they defiled a Hindu temple instead of a mosque. It's amazing that hate finds its targets regardless of any kind of real information. I'm curious if you can share a little more about the kind of prejudice that your community has faced here in Canada.
Well, Michael, I just firstly want to say the Holocaust was the most heinous crime in human history, and October 7th was similar. So, it's deeply, as an ally, it's been deeply disturbing to see the spiraling out of control anti-Semitic incidents all over Canada. and especially in Toronto, as we know, which is where a majority of our community lives. Please know that the Hindus stand in solidarity with you, and we're grateful for our allyship. You know, definitions matter. As you know, you're struggling with defining anti-Semitism, because there are those who refuse to accept that anti-Zionism is also anti-Semitism. For Hindus, the situation is even like a lot worse, because there is no recognition of anti-Hindu hate. No organization, except a few that we've personally worked with, recognize there is such a thing as Hinduphobia or anti-Hindu hatred. They see us doing well. You know, Hindus are usually, you know, hardworking, and you know, because of the point system, there's people who came, were educated, they have good jobs, the kids excel in school, so they look at us and say, what racism? But indeed, there is a huge amount of racism that we're facing, but it's not defined. It's not even in any anti-racism policy at the federal or provincial level or municipal level. So if incidents of anti-hate happen, they're not recorded. So that is a big challenge for us. In 2022, I wrote a 40-page document on recognizing Hinduphobia, and I've circulated it everywhere, but it has had no impact. Because the problem with our community is that, unlike the Jewish community, the Hindu community does not come forward to report incidents. I know you face a challenge too, to a lesser degree, but for the Hindu community, it is a very big problem, because you know, our culture tells us to move on. When bad things happen, you know, move on. It's some karma, you've gone through it, you're safe, move on. So this is kind of, and also there's fear of the children getting a consequence if you report that they're being abused or bullied. Fear that police will come after you if you report something. Fear that the perpetrator is going to come after you. We have had numerous incidents, just unbelievably painful for the parents in school. I'll give you a couple examples. One young woman, a Hindu woman in school, was force-fed beef in the, her hands were tied back to her back, and beef was force-fed to her. She was taken to the bathroom, and this was done to her. As you know, Hindus revere cows, they don't eat beef, but she was force-fed that. Hindus are called kafirs, our gods are made fun of in school. They make fun of the bindi, which is the sign of the third eye, just for you to know. And there's incredible pressure on the kids to convert into a different religion. I'm not going to take names here, but Hindus face a great deal. My own daughter was told to wash herself because she was brown when she was little. But, you know, it's very painful. We go through this, but we don't report it. And severe cases of physical assault, the parents are not reporting. And it's a real issue for us, because if you look at the statistics that just came out, right, for hate crimes, you won't find Hindus statistics, because we're not reporting it, we're not going to court for it. So this is an issue for us to deal with in our own community.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to deal with one more issue that I think is a challenging one, but it's important to be raised in our conversation today. I've had the privilege of visiting India myself twice. Just before the pandemic, a group, some of whom happen to be here today, of temple members, and I went on a Jewish tour to India. But before that, I was there with a group of rabbis, and the group of rabbis drove around in our touring in India, and on the front of the bus was a swastika. Because the swastika, historically, properly using the word, is an ancient Hindu symbol. And please, if anything I say, Ragini, doesn't land right, you'll tell me. And the Nazis perverted that symbol, creating the Nazi Hakenkreuz, that people nevertheless in regular conversation continue to refer to as the swastika, even though it's in fact a perversion of an ancient symbol from your tradition. This week, I was mentioning before services to Laura, this week at New York University, during the week of commencement there, someone flew a handmade flag on a flagpole with a Jewish star in the middle and a Nazi Hakenkreuz on either side of the star. We're all too familiar with what it means or how it feels to us to have our symbols defiled and changed from symbols of identity into symbols of hate. Now, this is a challenging topic for our two communities because the enduring trauma of the Shoah is around the Nazi crime, the Nazi Hakenkreuz representing it and called so commonly swastika, that it's a difficult place for us to talk and hear each other. So I wondered if I could invite you to talk a little bit about your community's symbol and about what it's meant to your community to have that ancient symbol perverted and connected to hate in the modern world.
Thank you so much, Michael, for bringing this issue up. And I know it's a very, very painful issue, and my heart goes out to all of you here. Because each one of you has an ancestor who was in that horrible thing that happened, the Holocaust. But it's very painful for Hindus to take some responsibility or role in that. And that's what the swastika, being identified as the Nazi hate symbol, has been. And we have been silent for all these years, almost 70, 80 years, but slowly we're starting to speak up and raise this issue that Hindus have nothing to do with the Nazi swastika. Jews have lived in India since 2,000 years. I think, Rabbi, you would know more about the Jewish history in India, the Jews in India. There's only 5,000 left there, but at the peak there were a lot more. And they've all, done the Aliyah, is it called that?
Yeah, made Aliyah, absolutely.
They've made Aliyah. And Hindus were never persecuted. I want you to know that Hindus were never, in the entire 2,200 years, Hindus have never faced persecution in India. They have been welcomed, they have lived there freely. And so that's where it's very painful that swastika, which is an ancient symbol for Hindus, if you count the Buddhists and Jains, it's almost 2 billion people. The Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists revere the swastika. It's a Sanskrit word that means well-being, and it's part of all our religious traditions. It's on the chest of the Jain, Mahavir, of the Jain god, and every temple in my own house, it's a very auspicious symbol. And along with the Om symbol, these are the two auspicious symbols. Everywhere you'll go, you'll see it. And so the question, of course, becomes, why? Why should Hindus care about this? It's because we are not being allowed. First of all, it's a complete lie to spread around that the swastika, the ancient Hindu symbol, is somehow related to the Nazis. It creates prejudice against us. And secondly, we're not allowed to use it because, our children get bullied. If you put up a sign, a swastika on a Hindu Heritage Month poster, they say, well, this is a Nazi sign. Our children, we don't feel comfortable letting them wear it because they're going to get bullied. And we don't want a Jewish child to feel uncomfortable that, oh my God, this person. So it's important that we educate that this is not a symbol of hate And we're very grateful to the Jewish community, to B'nai B'rith, Richard Richardson, who picked this up, and for the Allyship of Mark Sandler, and for all of you to help us get this word out. But the question always in your mind is, how did it happen? Something must have happened that, so two things happened. In the late 1800s, 1880, 1890s, in the last century, there was a huge Enlightenment movement. There was a great love-in with the Indian, with the Sanskrit texts. At that time, they were discovering the math and geometry and all this science that was hidden in the ancient texts, the Hindus, that they were being discovered by the West, that treasure of knowledge. And there was great environment. And so then they started to find swastik-like symbols across the world, including in the indigenous communities. It was in all of Europe. They had similar symbols, which were different meanings to different people, and they were called by different names. Now, Hitler, in his book Mein Kampf, never used the word swastik. He only used Hakenkreuz or hooked cross. Now, I appeal to your logic. Why would a Nazi, Hitler, use a foreign symbol to appeal to his own Christian, country? That makes no sense, right? To bring in a foreign symbol or word. It was always the hooked cross. And in his book, he consistently only used, and he clearly describes it, that it's a red symbol, the way it's, kind of twisted, within a black. I'm sorry, it's traumatic for you to listen to the swastik word all the time, but I'm hoping that I can relieve you with the stress that that is not a Hindu symbol, and Hindus have nothing to do with that word. And from 1920 to 1945, all the government documents of the Nazi government never used the word swastik. They only used Hakenkreuz. So then how did that happen that it began to be called swastik? It was with the wrong translation and with some ill intent. There was one translation by an English scholar, Dutkin, I think it was named, Dougal, and he did a correct translation, clearly said it's Hakenkreuz. Later on, there was James Murphy and some others who began to substitute it with the swastik because and some critics claim that he wanted, because he was a Catholic, he wanted to remove it from the stain of that hate symbol from any association with the Christian faith, and felt that this other option was available. Now, this is, critics say, we don't know what the truth is, but we only know that it became very popular. It was picked up by the New York Post, New York Times. It was picked up by Hollywood. Movies were made, and they were called the swastik. And from that time, it began to be commonly said swastik. So we're very grateful to B'nai B'rith for taking this leadership with Mark Sandler and others, who we have taken it to Bill C-9 to the federal government. And in the Bill C-9, because of our joint advocacy, it is clearly stated that the Nazi hate symbol is the Hakenkreuz. There is absolutely no mention of the swastika. It was there and it was removed. So we're very grateful to the Justice Committee for listening to the Hindu-Jewish Coalition, for removing that stain from that document, and our efforts to educate the community, including our dear Jewish allies and friends. I urge you to please forgive us for any hurt that we may have caused you, which we haven't. But if you have ever thought that somehow the swastik was related to the Hindus, I implore you, please let that go. And I will continue to speak about this, and if you need further information, you can write to, and we can send you an official document that was submitted.
Well, Ragini, I can't thank you enough for coming here today. And thank you for, that I wanted us to talk about that topic. It's obviously a very challenging topic because it's a place where the traumas of our two communities collide, coming together from outside. But what's really meaningful is to have this challenging conversation in the context of knowing what an ally you have been and your community has been with our community against hate and against Jew hatred. And we want to stand with you against hatred of Hindus as well in our community, because it's the values that bring us together that we share.